Welcome to Deep Thought. Whether a syndrome is good or bad is relative to the situation. Now, this is an interesting episode because I was going to talk about main character syndrome. And it was something I saw in a magazine I happened to go through. Hey, Rom will go through magazines. It was in, I believe it was Psychology Today. And just skimming through it and then like looking it up online, apparently it's when someone feels like it's described as a person maybe feeling like they the star of their own story, and they self-centered to the point where they're the star no matter their flaws, and then everybody is supportive of them. They're secondary players. And I can see some parts of why that would be considered bad, but I thought my first thought was like, yeah, that's a good thing in my view, to see yourself as a star. I'm just saying me. And it's not even worth, I wouldn't even argue this with psychologists. I'm just saying from my point of view, every single person is the star of their own story, because ultimately every single person is responsible for their lives. And yes, I don't mind, hey, in y'all story, I'm the supporting actor, I ain't the star. Every single one of y'all stories, I see myself as the supporting thing because it's your story. I don't live your life. I'm at best I'm a 10-minute part of your life? At best? 10 minutes a day, depending on the channel. If you watch all of my stuff, I don't know, that might be less than an hour a day still. And I'm good with that, because all y'all supporting characters in my story. Every single person is the star of their story. But the way this syndrome was presented, it wasn't presented as a good thing. And I thought that was interesting. And as I said, I was going to do something on it. But then I thought about other syndromes. I tell you what, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. You know, when you just do something over and over, or you got to keep everything straight. And I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes it'll pop out with me. Not majorly, but then I thought about it when I was working. I told you I've worked 1,000 jobs. I was working retail at a major department store. And people used to, the merchandisers, that was my main job, used to joke about OCD. Now, I know somebody who's really compulsive to the point they can't suffer. I know they looking at it like, no, it's nothing funny. And I feel for them. Like I said, but it's relative. For somebody like that who they really can't function because of it is bad. But we joked about it because just the nature of any job, whether it's merchandising, maybe it's stocking food shelves. When you're putting up products in a store, retail, like a clothing store, a grocery store, something like that, having an extreme attention to detail is extremely good. It's necessary, in fact. That's why we would joke about it. But we would keep stuff fixed. I remember we had one merchandiser in there. I mean, this dude was outstanding. I mean, he could really make something pop. And I remember he would just go back and he would go back and forth, just he'll fix something like a mannequin or something, look at it, do it again. But his work was outstanding, but it's relative. It's relative, even something like autism. There are a lot of genius people who are on the spectrum, including, it's said, a couple billionaires are on the spectrum. In fact, Elon Musk, he said he's on the spectrum, Asperger's. And there's a suspicion that Bill Gates is on the spectrum. These are billionaires. But the reason why it might have been a good thing, because they stayed focused on something. Sometimes it's a good thing if maybe you stay so focused on a project. And indeed, there's many young people on the spectrum. They might be good with computers and stuff, writing programs, sticking with a job. And indeed, I remember seeing a story about a guy who opened a car wash specifically because his son was on the spectrum, and they specifically hired young men and women on the spectrum. But he said the thing was, they were really good with cleaning the car. They would really clean a car extremely well. So it's like, it's relative. Is it bad? Is it good? It depends, because I look at it more any syndrome, it was like, okay, yeah, there's a bad part, but what's the good part about it? Because it might be related to what someone has to do in life. You know, it might give them skills at something else. My sister, may she rest in peace, coming up, we thought we talking like 60s, 70s, 80s, she was mentally retarded. She wasn't. I had her IQ tested in the late 90s by a professional psychiatrist or a psychologist, something like that. He said she scored on some tests higher than his IQ. And that was because I noticed she had an aptitude for art. You know, it depends. You know, any syndrome, anything is relative. Okay, it can be bad in a situation, but good in another. In fact, even if you're neurotypical or you don't have any diagnosed syndromes or something, you're still going to have good and bad behaviors depending on the situation. Because ultimately everything, there's no black and white when it comes to good and evil. It's all relative. It's all relative to the situation. And I was thinking about that. Like I said, it was inspired by, I actually wrote it down. I was going to say main character syndrome, but then I said, like I said, I was like, is that a bad thing? People, in my view, everybody is the star of their own story. Because to me, it means they take responsibility for their lives. Everybody has to love themselves before they love anyone else. I said on my men's channel, a man's first relationship is to himself. And I'll say that for the women too. A woman's first relationship is to herself. Because a lot of people don't love themselves. Who's to say somebody with the main character syndrome, they simply love themselves? You know, it's not always a bad thing. And even you talked about even something like narcissism. Even something now, yeah, people have been hurt by people they called narcissists, but, you know, is it a bad thing? I mean, yeah, it's a bad thing it's definitely a bad thing if you use it, if it hurts someone outside of you. But feeling good about yourself, is that a bad thing? And with any syndrome, that's the thing. It can be bad if you use it to hurt somebody, no matter what it is, if it causes outside pain. But it can also help you depending on what it is. I want y'all to think about that. And there's no, you know, and that's not some absolute. That's not absolute. Because somebody could get on here and say, well, no, this is bad. Okay. All I'm saying is it depends. Now, somebody else might see it as different. And, you know, and like I said, even with any syndrome, if it causes the person pain or it causes outside people pain, it's definitely bad. But what if it helps you? Being OCD helped a lot of people in the retail industry. You know, a lot of people were getting paid very well just to make something look nice because they will fold everything perfectly and everything. So I want y'all to think about that. All right? Depends. It depends on the circumstances. And one thing I'll say about that, perhaps it's a clue to what somebody is good at. I'll use my sister for an example. Like I say, the psychologist, he diagnosed her IQ as higher than his in some things, not everything. But those things were things that she was really good at. And maybe if we had known or we had a more advanced knowledge of autism, she could have lived a different life. You know, may she rest in peace. But her life might have been different if the knowledge that the psychologist presented in the late 90s was available to people in the early 60s. I want y'all to think about that. You know, it's a matter of perspective. So anyway, that's all I have for now. I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.